So Nico and Sage have their Cub Scouts, and they have been learning about the UU Church as part of their activities. And Shawnee here, Sage's mother, has been working with them as a scout master or den mother. Okay, so they've gone through a book about the UU Church. They've learned about the 7 principles, and we're giving them our love and help pin today. So I just want to come on, you guys, Nico, Sage. Good work, you guys, in learning about the church, and let's give you your pins.
I'm going to pin that one on Nico, and it goes right above here. You want to pin it? I just don't want to. Good job, congratulations.
You can hold that. Don't let okay. All right. Turn around, guys, and show them your pins. Good work. And here's Shawnee.
The pins have a picture of the chalice, and they're specific to UU and the UU principles. So the Cub Scouts, the boys can earn their Duty to God award and then their own religious emblem. So it's pretty cool that they received this. This is an award for 7 to 11-year-old boys, and these guys got it pretty young, so we're proud of them for working on this.
Good job, guys. Thank you, everybody. Guys, you can go back to your seats.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So yesterday I had a chance to talk to my dad a bit about some of his memories, which was a really good thing to be able to do, and something he told me that his father had done when he was serving as a member of the school board when he was living in Castle Vale. I thought was a good thing to start out this talk with. He was asked to give the 8th grade commencement speech, and apparently my grandfather was in no way a public speaker, and so he decided that he was talking with his older son. He had actually, in his family, it was kind of 2 families in a way, because when he first married Geneva Larson, they had had 2 children, Glenn and Eva, and then later his wife had passed away, and then he remarried Dora, who was my grandmother, and had my dad and his younger brother Paul. But so his older brother Glenn was already much older. He had returned from World War II, and at this point he was selling encyclopedias. And for those people who are younger, who may not know what these were before Google, you would go to an encyclopedia, which was a large volume of books, might be that long, all organized by alphabet order, and you'd try to learn anything you needed to learn. But one of the good things about having actually a current version of an encyclopedia, apparently, was that you could write to their researchers any question you had, and they would try to respond with something that would help, illuminate your knowledge of the world or whatever it was. And so he was talking with his son Glenn about this commencement speech he had to do, and they got an idea. Let's write to them and see if they will get me a commencement speech to give. And sure enough, they did it. They sent him back a commencement speech. He practiced it really well and apparently pulled it off. Unfortunately, no encyclopedia researchers were used today. So, I'm on my own. Something that my dad taught me was that this has just really stuck with me. Any true teaching in religion, any true thing found in science, there would be a way to be able to get those things to match together. And I was raised as a Mormon. That was my background. That was where it was just who I was. And I really appreciated that teaching that he gave me. When I was in high school, I had one of my first, well, I had a really good biology teacher. She taught me about how evolution worked, and it was really exciting to me. I had never understood before just how real and true this could work, you know, and how we could really understand the world better this way. But it also kind of made me wonder a little bit because of what I had been learning in church. And my dad talking to me, he was helpful in just saying, you know, here's some things that different Mormon church leaders have taught over the years and decades, and thought in some private conversations and in some more public things. And he showed me that it wasn't just like one thing that people were saying, and that I could go out there and learn for myself what was, I could figure things out. And I don't need to be afraid of doing scientific research and learning something. And that really stuck with me. I took that knowledge, and as this being about a bit of my spiritual journey, when I like I said earlier, I was always just really true blue Mormon. I was a deacon at 12, teacher, priest, you know, did the sacrament, and went on a mission, came back, met my wife Amanda, and got married and had one kid at the time when when I kind of had this crisis of faith, where I realized that I had problems that weren't reconciling between what I had learned and knew were true from my own experiences and from the experiences of people who I knew and loved and trusted, and then on the other hand, my experience with my religion. And I ended up just completely changing during that time, and realized I needed to go a different path. And so yesterday I asked my dad about how this affected him, and it kind of surprised me because he told me that what it reminded him of was his family when he was younger. He had his own dad. Had grown up in Huntington, Utah, and apparently his family being a ways away, and whatever the consequences of his father's polygamous marriage and being the very youngest and that family and stuff like that, they really didn't go to church at all. And so when my grandpa had first married, there wasn't even a concern. He didn't go to the temple or anything like that. But after his first wife had died and he was remarrying, he met Dora, and Dora insisted, you know, you're going to need to take me to the temple. And so he went ahead and he did it. He at the time, he even had to go and get sealed to his first wife first, and to his 2 already born children, which I thought was really an interesting bit of family history I wasn't aware of. And then he married his wife there, and but in their house, he also had Uncle Will that apparently was, you know, he certainly wasn't LDS, I guess. You know, he was fine with going to the bar and having good times. He wasn't a drunk or anything like that, but he was just a fun guy that way. And there wasn't like a lot of pressure there. And also my dad, he remembers from growing up, he never had, aside from when he was, you know, maybe a bit 4 years old and younger, but his dad didn't really ever go to church. And instead, what my dad said was that he had a philosophy of, he wasn't a preacher, he was more of a liver, rather not a preaching person of the gospel. He was a person who liked to live the gospel that was in his life. And that maybe was why he couldn't also give speeches, I don't know. But my dad, I'm not sure how it was for him in his life. His life was so much different from mine when he was younger. When he was 16 years old, the day after Christmas, he learned that his father was crushed in a coal mine. And it was just a completely different time. His brother Glenn, who had been a medic in World War II and had been involved in the Red Cross, and was a trainer there, and did a lot of first aid and other kinds of things. Another thing he also did after returning from the war was he was a part-time mortician. And he was actually involved in helping prepare my crushed grandfather's body to be ready for burial. It's something I don't even know how to understand, how that was. Going back a bit earlier in their life, my dad's younger brother, Paul, shortly after he was born, about 2 weeks after he was born, he was a healthy baby, and he got very sick, had a high fever, and developed cerebral palsy. And this severely limited his ability to be able to, he couldn't move his legs and arms, he couldn't speak in a way that was independent of himself. And my dad tells of how they learned how to communicate with Paul. It was actually first discovered by my grandfather because he was such a good nurturer, and he was involved in feeding him one day, and he realized that when he's sticking out his tongue, he means no, and when he leaves it in, he means yes. And through that first recognition that my grandpa had of how he was communicating to them, they started to open up the world that was inside his head. Because inside his head, everything was like a normal child. He just couldn't talk, and he couldn't walk, and he couldn't move his arms, and he couldn't do those other kinds of things. Also, my grandpa and my grandma, because of the extensive needs that he had, they would actually have him lay in the middle of the bed with them every night because he had to be helped to get up and urinate twice a night. It was a huge undertaking, and it was a lot of work. And at the age of 9, Paul had passed away. That was about not quite 2 years previous to when his dad had died in the coal mine. So when I'm talking to my dad and seeing, how does he think his dad saw that role of being a father, and he says that the things that he really held up was he saw in his dad honesty, hard work, nurturing, and being a partner to his wife were that was his gospel. That was what he preached by what he lived every day. He did a lot of other things. They built the first modern and state-of-art movie theater in Castledale. It's called the Rocket Theater. They had started building that in 1946 and got it first going in 48. And during that time, they were able to bring a lot of culture and things to Castledale. And they found that between he and his brothers that had helped get this enterprise going, that after paying the loans and operating expenses, it wasn't enough to support 3 families. And just hearing a lot of the things that they were doing at that time, they were always very busy, very hardworking. And I don't know, that's just something that's really kind of hit me as really neat, how they did that. I think I just say this last thing is thinking of my dad and his influence on me and my spiritual journey. I was reading through the UU principles last night, and think that this 4th one that is in there is really what my dad taught me, which was a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I definitely got that from my dad, and I'm very appreciative of that. And then hearing the stories from my grandpa, I understand better that he definitely understood the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So when I was younger, I never really thought much about parenthood, never really envisioned myself as a father. I was focused on other things, travel, adventure, work. I wanted to go places and do things. Settling down and raising a family, that was about the last thing on my mind through my 20s into my 30s. Being a parent, it didn't register, it didn't even enter the realm of consideration. Even when my wife and I had children, it was partially about timing. I'm old for a father. Had my first one when I was 41, but I didn't want to be too old. Then, gradually, I came to look at things differently. I don't want to say something inside all of a sudden clicked when my daughter, ILN, was born. It's kind of cliche, but I came to realize that there was something more important than me and my personal pursuits. Caring for ILN, and now Nico as well, being there for them, helping them find their way, became a bigger cause. Parenthood, in a way, has been a sort of salvation for me, pulling me from maybe more self-centered focus, kind of helps me transcend some of the petty stuff of everyday life. It's given me a deeper sense of meaning. Maybe that's standard fare, maybe that's how it is being a parent, but for me it's been big. So I don't come here with any grand revelation, I don't think. My message is pretty straightforward. All I can say today, Father's Day, is that being a father, it's a blessing. I'm far from a perfect dad. I lose my patience, frequently spend too much time at work, but when I'm there, I'm all in. Being able to help my two kids, getting their attention, spending time with them, it's more rewarding for me than anything else. In a way, I feel like I'm getting more than I'm receiving. Having my son say he's glad I'm his soccer coach, it's like gold. Feels pretty good. Having my daughter see the sense in my pleas to read books, to turn off the computer so it doesn't turn her brain into mush, is priceless. What I say and do seems to register, sometimes anyway, and maybe it's just because they're not teenagers yet, I don't know. But really, that sort of role, and I want to stress this, it's applicable in broader circumstances, not just biological relationships. It's not necessarily restricted to men. In the right circumstances, most anyone can be a father, a mentor, a sounding board, a listener, a giver of advice, a lifter of spirits. This is something I'm just learning, and I wonder why it took me so long. So, being a father, it's also made me think of my own parents in new ways. I remember them as being focused on their own things, work, their own interests, but looking back, I know they did the best they could to create a home for me growing up, a safe haven. Of late, for the past 15 years or so, after returning from several years abroad and making a go of it here in the US in newspapers, I felt more support from my dad than ever. He knows how shaky newspapers are, the tough road they face, and he's always let me know that he's there. If things got tough, he'd always tell me we could move into their basement, the basement of my childhood home. That may not sound so enticing, but it given me comfort, and it's a finished basement, so it's nice. But now my parents have moved into an old folks' home, sold the old family home. And now that he's getting on in years, it makes me sad to think the day will come when I won't have him to turn to in a pinch. Life, though, is a cycle, a circle, and I try to be the person my father has been to me for my own kids. I'm trying to learn and grow, something everyone of every age should do. I want my kids to know that I will be there for them no matter what. I will advocate for them. I will create a safe space for them. It's a daunting role. I will slip at times, but it's what I'm supposed to do, what I've learned from my dad. significantly, and getting back to an earlier point, I think that sort of attitude and outlook can be more broadly applied. I don't have it down by any means. I'm still getting a handle on it. But I think that role, trying to help others, being a safe haven, lifting others up, even has a place, should have a place when dealing with others, those who aren't your kids. Preparing this presentation, I realize, happily, that it's already happening here in this church, and I feel late to the game. Probably happens all over the place. Of course, you're not going to have the same sort of relationship with a coworker, an acquaintance, a neighbor, a fellow congregant here at the church that you do with your kids. It's a delicate balancing act, forming relationships with others, and it's probably a good idea to steer clear of offering unsolicited advice, which sometimes you do which you always do as a father. But offer congratulatory words, words of praise to others when merited. Let them know you get it. Listen. Don't be intrusive or overstep boundaries, but even small gestures can mean a lot. Apply the attitude at work, here at church, with kids, people your age, your elders even. That sort of attitude, is it fatherliness, just plain old friendliness, can go a long way in providing a boost, making the world just a little bit more sunny.
Five years ago, I spoke here on Father's Day with Tom Taylor. Back then, I reflected on my relationship with my deceased father and on being a father to our two adult children who lived far away. A year and a half ago, things changed. We now have a beautiful granddaughter, Delilah Jean. She calls me Poppy. And I'm happy to say that after a long time of separation, our family is now back together, living in Ogden at our place. At Debbie's and my invitation, I should add. Until they're able to find homes of their own in this area. But until then, it has been a delight, it is a delight, to share our home with EJ and Delilah and our son Chris and his wife Ruby. I'll be back.
Okay.
So, how about the experiences and life lessons of being a grandfather? And how is it different from being a father in younger days? I want to move beyond the usual observations of you get to have a do-over, or it's great to be able to corrupt little children and then hand them back to their parents. Those things are true, but they're superficial. Grandfathers are different than fathers, or should be. The passing years bring many blessings to those who evolve to receive them. I can now pursue my professional activities with much greater freedom, with less interference to family time. I'm less driven than I used to be. I'm wiser than I used to be, and more patient than I used to be. I'm more grateful than I used to be. I think the main demon of aging is not physical decline, but time compression. The perception that time is speeding up and continues to accelerate as we get older. Einstein has taught us that time is not absolute and depends on the observer, but this is ridiculous. In a flash, Delilah will be 20 years old and I will be either stored in a jar or near the end of my own life, whereas the first time around I had my whole life before me. So there's a sense of urgency that builds up. There's so much that I can give and so little time. Thankfully, my anxiety about limited time has been helped by Delilah. At home with her, I have returned to the simple pleasures of life. It's okay to use whatever colors I want, and to color outside the lines, or not even on the page. It's okay to just sweep the floor for the sheer pleasure, without worrying about spotless results or picking anything up. It's a lot of fun to go down a little slide, and then reverse by crawling back up. It's okay to just turn the page of a picture book to the picture you like best. Never mind the larger story or the supposed moral lesson. And running around naked is not a bad thing at all. At least in the privacy of your own home. 18-month-old babies give another huge benefit because they have only one mode of operation, and that's living in the moment. They don't worry about the future. They don't dwell on the past. Everything is about right now. So Poppy is drawn into this big time. And Poppy has relearned some life lessons about living in the moment, big time. When I'm with Delilah one-on-one, the past and the future disappear. What a blessing to be with this little person, to live in her world, which is the world of right now. I can show what I mean by telling you my favorite activity with Delilah. It isn't coloring or counting or doing puzzles or rolling balls through a maze or any kind of so-called activities or play. It is quiet time. We leave the noise and activity of the house. I carry her outside to the back porch. We sit in a rocker with her on my lap, gently bouncing her with the subtle leg vibe action that I've made as my signature connection with her. She gently hums, mimicking the vibration of Poppy's knee. It is late in the day. We watch the birds alight among the trees as they prepare to roost. I whispered to her that the birdies are going to bed. The leaves rustle in the wind. The colors on the mountain grow warmer. A dog barks in the distance, saying good night. The sprinklers come on, and a robin pulls a worm from the wet grass. Both of us see and hear all these things in silent reverence, pointing them out to each other, wordless but deeply connected. These quiet moments are what grandfathers dream of, and what grown-up grandchildren retell as their earliest childhood memories, perhaps to their own grandchildren. May the circle be unbroken. Blessed be, amen.